While I really wish I could teach you to read minds, and I'm working on that one, I'll get back to you, we can actually look for evidence that we're seeing the real person, hearing the real person, and have a true reflection of their capabilities. Now, it's called evidentiary interviewing. It's an interviewing system that I created because I was finding that behavioral interviewing is being gamed and no longer works, and it's questionable how well it worked in the first place. The reason I say it's being gamed, just last week I had somebody tell me that they were talking to a candidate, and the candidate was being candid with them how they were gaming, they were getting around behavioral interviews, how there were only a few questions really when it boils down to it, and they figured out how to answer them in a way that satisfied everybody. Look, if something's around long enough, people figure it out. They figure out how to get around it, and that's the problem with behavioral interviews. Evidentiary interviews look for concrete evidence. So I'm going to give you two suggestions on how to use this to see if you have the real person, the real deal, that what they're representing is the absolute truth. The first thing is you ask for very specific examples from their past that demonstrates what you're looking for. Now, that's a behavioral interviewing component, but what's different about evidentiary interviewing is you're going to ask for minute details. You're going to get into specifics. You're going to ask them where they were, what they were wearing, who they were with, what was the weather like that day, what day of the week was this. Now, you're going to shock them a little bit, but here's why this is important. If people struggle with this, just naturally struggle because they're trying to remember, that's one thing. But if they stammer and fall and stutter, guess what? You've got somebody who had been putting on a good show because they can't give you details that weren't there. So that's the first one. The second one is do demonstrations, do role plays, do a practice session with them. Simulate a conversation where you're the client, they're the salesperson, or you're the recruiter and they're the candidate. And if you do that, you're going to see more of the real person show up. If you simulate that scenario, in fact, if you go out and do it in front of a desk or an interview room, if you have one, you're going to see what you're going to get when they come on board. And make it tough on them. Give them a scenario where you're behaving in a way that's a little bit difficult, standoffish, whatever it is. If you do that, you're going to see that person where they can't make stuff up. They can't just impress you. They have to they have to go into all of their skill set and pull out everything they have, and that's when you're going to see what they're going to bring to you. So do this kind of evidentiary interviewing. You're going to get past the bluster. You're going to get past the posturing. You're going to see the real person. And when I started doing this, I started doing this a couple decades ago when I finally figured out the idea of evidentiary interviewing. I went from 50% turnover to 10% turnover or less. 90% of my hires worked out as compared to 50% of my hires because I was making the right choice from the very beginning.